If you know or have played Frozen Synapse, the strategy combat game that developers Mode 7 have made previously, then Frozen Cortex will be familiar to you. Frozen Cortex makes strategic movement and positioning of your players the core skill and therefore the hardest part to get right. Frozen Cortex is a turn-based strategy game about placing and running your robotic team members to score at the end of the pitch, or to intercept the other team as they try to do the same. The team with the most points at the end of the round wins. Sounds simple, but this is a complex game, sometimes frustratingly so, with a learning curve that will have you adjusting how you play for a good while before you start to feel confident in a match. The basics are that each player decides the movement of their robots during the planning phase. Here you can throw the ball if one of your robots has it, and make each of them run and stop at specific places. You can tweak this further by setting waypoints and timers if you want. You can also do the same thing to your opponent's characters to simulate how things might turn out. This has no effect on their actual moves, but it is useful for seeing where the ball can be passed, etc. After you're happy with your orders, you press the prime button to lock them in, and once the challenger has also primed their moves, they are both simulated at the same time. The result is a nice cinematic of how those moves interacted. Then you're on to the next planning phase, if there is one. This is where small changes matter, because your robots can only block the opposite team's movement when they are stood still. Stopping your player too early or too late makes the difference between you knocking them out and them getting the drop on you instead. There are useful guidelines to show what areas you can intercept the ball in, how close you have to be to chase the ball carrier, and how big an area you can block. So generally, you have enough information to make some sort of decision. Despite having 3 different tutorials, the most useful is the text that you can bring up from the top left of any game. However, your greatest teacher will be experience and failure. There is a good story campaign that pits you in a league against AI teams. Unless you're confident enough to make mistakes in the open waters and multiplayer matches, then this is a good place to start. Either way, it will take you a few tries to get all the rules down and figure out when they do or don't change for specific instances. The story is told through TV coverage and interviews that you can read in between matches, so if you're not interested, then you can ignore it. But it does cover an interesting mystery of cheating in a professional sports league. I often get stuck in that first planning stage of readjusting and covering my bases and thinking up all the possible ways in which my opponent might best me. It's at this point I imagine that the other team is glad that they can get their turn done without having to wait for me. If you want to avoid this, then there is a 30-second turn mode which significantly speeds up the flow of play. As in many strategy games, the fundamental principle is thinking several moves ahead. This is what I've been trying to do to improve how I play recently, and if I stumble upon a move that hasn't been guarded against, then it tends to work out better than just reacting turn by turn. The sheer volume of customizability is great because if there is something that you don't like about how your team plays or even the rules of the game, then you can modify them in custom leagues, match rules and player stats. Everything has a menu somewhere, even your team color and decoration. This should give it a long life for those that get bored of the standard matches. However, the player stat changes are hard to grasp because there are no tooltips that give adequate explanations of what all the abilities do and what the actual effects are in a game. Frozen Cortex has a simple and easy to grasp strategy concept, but the actual implementation of it is as complicated as it needs to be for you to have meaningful control over your team and for the rules to seem fair. The wins are satisfying and the losses can be maddening because you know that the only reason that they happen is your choices. I think that the future of this game relies heavily on its community. So, if you're willing to invest the time into it, this could well be your new obsession.